Hi, Michelle Shepard, registered dietitian and owner of West Coast Nutrition. And in this week's newsletter, we are talking about a new series we're hoping to keep going, which is do certain foods cause weight gain? Will cutting them out help you lose weight? And the very first one is going to be milk and dairy. Now, so many clients come to me wondering if they need to do an elimination diet or cut out dairy or wheat or other foods to help lose weight. And these clients are the ones who are often stuck despite having a pretty healthy, base diet, they're cooking at home and they're feeling frustrated. I'm sure you can relate to being in that place. Now, I want to make it really clear that what works for you is going to be personalized. So we're going to go through the evidence base, a bit of my experience with, working with clients and some of the things that might come up about whether or not dairy might be impacting your fat loss or your weight gain, depending on where you are. But I think it's really important that you also either pay close attention to what works for your body or work with someone to get to the bottom. There is a lot of individuality here. Now, let's dig in. Overall, milk and dairy products have taken a lot of heat for just about every illness under the sun and been scapegoated for inflammation, gut issues, weight gain, immune responses, autoimmune things, and more. But the research actually shows a very different and much more complex story, as with all things nutrition. It's very rare that there's a clear cut answer to whether or not you should eat something or it's good or bad for you. So, remembering that with our microbiome, our gut, our immune systems, they all might respond differently. There's some notes later on about how to personalize this a little bit for you, but let's dig into what the research says overall. Now, when I say dairy, I'm talking about mostly like cows or goat's milk products. So things like cheese and cottage cheese, whey and dairy protein powders, straight up liquid milk, anything made from those foods. Now, I also want to be clear that the caveat is I'm talking about Canadian dairy here, which is very well regulated for antibiotics and growth hormones. Those things are not added or present in the milk that makes it to the processing plants to make cheese and yogurt. So I don't buy non-organic US dairy, as their regulation is quite different, and the things we talk about here might not apply to that population. Now, generally, research has actually shown a very positive association with dairy and the bioactive compounds within it, with the caveat that for most people with a healthy-ish gut to start with, it is an excellent source of protein, especially the concentrated fermented ones like Greek yogurt and cottage cheese and skyr. It's one of the few really rich sources of calcium naturally in food without supplementation. Lactoferrins, a bioactive compound, inhibit the growth of iron-dependent bacteria, one of the reasons that we can see really stubborn iron deficiency in some women and men. Remember, iron is also important for fat loss. It also decreases viral cells' ability to attach or infect healthy cells, and those lactoferrins have probiotic activity. So they stimulate growth of those positive probiotics, the anti-inflammatory probiotics in our gut, bifidobacteria. Oligosaccharides, including lactose, which is the natural sugar in milk, are also fuel for healthy bifidobacterium. And from what we can see in an otherwise healthy gut, it does not increase overall inflammatory load. It actually seems to decrease it, which is the opposite of what all of the fear mongering in most of like Instagram and the internet says. Remember, dairy in and of itself, unless you've sort of like turned it into ice cream or deep fried it or something, is a fairly whole food. We do some light processing to things like, yogurt and cheese, but it's just a food like any other. So it's not as, evil or scary as most people make it out to be. If you've removed dairy in the past and you didn't have gut issues to start and you lost weight, in my clients, when we kind of look back at what happened, it is most often linked to a change in calories. So they stopped eating ice cream, twice a week and saved, maybe 600 calories there if you're only eating half a cup of ice cream each time. They swapped regular milk for almond milk, which saves probably a good 200 calories every day, which is, 1,400 in a week. These small changes can add up over a week and cause significant decreases in your overall calorie intake, which will help weight loss, right? So we know we want a small to moderate calorie deficit in order to break into fat stores and use them for energy. So if you've removed it and sort of saw weight loss without having any issues with gut issues before, it's likely that you've cut out some foods you were struggling to control, or you made a bit of a calorie deficit, which isn't good or bad. I want to be very clear that whether you eat dairy or not, I'm agnostic on that. You get to decide what foods work for you. Now, before we get into why you may not respond well to dairy, or for those of you who it might actually be sort of causing issues with gut or weight loss, my overall recommendation for most of my weight loss clients, which is probably you included, is if you are not having any bloating, gas, issues with bowel movements with eating dairy, I encourage you to include it. You'll know you tolerate it if you're not getting any of those symptoms, if you have no changes in motility and no changes in how you feel. And in over a decade of weight loss coaching, I have not had one client who lost weight just from cutting dairy out, right? As long as they were replacing it with other foods. The calcium in dairy is key for fat oxidation, which is breaking down fat and burning it for energy, and the inhibition, so the slowing down of building new fat cells, which is going to make keeping weight off easier. It is a quick and easy protein source, especially the yogurt, your whey powder, things like cottage cheese. And getting enough protein is the top rule for weight loss. So 1.5 grams per kilo of body weight. It makes you fuller, it holds on to muscle. This makes it easier, and that's important. Plus, I want to throw out there that if eating well is enjoyable, it's more sustainable. We have a whole body of research, and I've got over a decade of client work to prove this. So if you love cheese, cutting it out will just likely keep you in that binge restrict cycle where you diet and get really tight. And then as soon as you're tempted by the food or you add it back, you've got no control. And you're actually worsening your impulse control when you do indulge when we cut things out completely. So including small amounts is usually better for consistency and so results with your weight over time. And this is actually why I include some lactose-free Greek yogurt, small amounts of cheese in my diet, even though I'm moderately lactose intolerant. So I have to be careful about threshold. Now, if you have tried playing with cutting out dairy or adding it back in and notice you do have some issues either with gut or weight or things like skin, there might be some things going on. So let's talk about what those are, because your experience is valid and bodies are unique. The first and most common one is just straight up lactose intolerance. And this can be temporary or permanent. And what is typically happening here most of the time, lactose intolerance is your body is no longer making as much of the enzyme, lactase, that we use to break lactose down so it can be absorbed. What this means is that sugar is arriving in your lower gut where your bacteria are and getting fermented. So they're using it as fuel instead. And that's causing bloating. They're creating byproducts that either speed up or slow down your gut. And that can cause discomfort, pain, loose bowel movements, constipation. Just depends on what bacteria are fermenting it. So if you're lactose intolerant, you will find that you have a threshold or kind of a marker where if you have more lactose than that, you're going to feel really uncomfortable. But under that threshold, you're probably okay. And this is very different from an allergy. Now, you can also have temporary lactose intolerance. If you have an inflammatory gut condition, such as Crohn's or colitis, or even a temporary colitis is something like a digestive flu or food poisoning, what happens is the absorptive surfaces, our little microvilli, get flattened. And that's where we absorb lactose. And so again, same thing, we get full protein or full lactose sugars making into lower gut, that gets fermented, and that can cause some issues. So we're seeing the same outcome where you're getting bloating and discomfort from over fermentation. And what you might find is as your gut heals and those little microvilli restore, your lactose tolerance resumes. So you get to be able to enjoy those foods more freely again. What I usually include in those people is to limit intake until your gut is soothed, usually giving yourself 4 to 6 weeks of just healthier movement and healthier gut symptoms before you try adding it back. But because it is such a nutrient dense food, it is worth getting to that point. And if you're struggling, getting some help, so you can include it again if you want. The other two reasons we get are IBS, or irritable bowel syndrome. This is an extension of lactose intolerance. So in someone with irritable bowel syndrome, we're either having oversensitivity of pain signals or stretch signals. So when we get a little bit of fermentation, even normal amounts happening, you feel full or pressure, you have pain, or we get changes in motility based on the gut bacteria happening in there. So things speed up or slow down in the bowels, which can cause lots of discomfort. Now, what this is a condition where any of the fermentable carbohydrates, which include other things like chickpeas and beans and onions and garlic, may be not well tolerated by the gut. This doesn't mean those foods are bad. These FODMAPs, or fermentable carbohydrates, are generally actually associated with excellent gut health when you're tolerating them. So what we want here, if you have irritable bowel syndrome, is to probably work with someone to get really clear on what your triggers are, get symptoms quieter, and eventually add back as many of those as you can tolerate again, because that's where long-term gut health comes in. But this is something you want to work with someone so you don't get stuck in elimination stage long-term, which is going to worsen your symptoms over time. Now, this is something to keep in mind that like all foods, it might not work for you ever. It might work for you later. It takes a little bit of personalization. And now the last one is if you're having what seems like an immune response. So you might get skin issues or eczema or breakouts or energy drops. You might get mucousy. And so what's happening here is a little bit less clear, but we do know that if your gut is compromised, the little gaps between cells, which are usually really close, get wider. And so milk proteins, which all proteins on foods are signaling molecules, make it from your gut into your bloodstream, where your immune system is going to identify those as a foreign invader, create antibodies. So when you eat dairy, it's going to cause that immune response, skin, energy, fatigue, pain in your joints, anything like that. Now, what's important here is that once those cells heal and those gaps close, your tolerance to dairy might actually return. So generally those proteins shouldn't make it through your gut. And if you're working with someone to really heal and soothe your gut, eventually that will probably get better. For some people, there is a true milk or dairy allergy, in which case they always get those symptoms, even in small amounts, even when their gut's really healed. And so this is where you're going to want to get some real specific support to make sure you're not eliminating it without need. And that also we're making sure to repair the root cause, which is your gut. Because what we do know about weight loss and gut health and weight loss in dairy is that if your gut is really out of whack, so we have microbial imbalances, we're not absorbing key micronutrients, we're getting things like iron deficiency because of it, we do actually see decreases in metabolic rate because of that immune response. Your survival mechanism pops in. We might see increase in inflammatory load, which is not from the milk, but from the gut's response to being out of whack overall. And so we want to, yes, eliminate foods that are causing us issues in the healing phase, but we want to make sure we repair the gut so we can restore all of the things that are actually causing your stubborn weight loss or maybe even some weight gain. So something to think about here, if you know, like I see a real response, but I don't know what to do about it, is you're probably not imagining it, but we do want to really get to the root of the gut health first before we can get that weight moving more easily. Now, milk often takes the blame for gut issues, so make sure you are looking at all of the foods you're eating at the same time you're having dairy before you tag it as the villain. Sometimes it might be something else that seems benign, like apples or broccoli or another food you just don't tolerate. So we want to get really clear and assess in an orderly way so you don't have an overly restricted diet. We know that makes weight loss harder, makes food enjoyment harder, and it's likely to make your gut worse long term. Now, if you get overwhelmed what to focus on and all of the kind of internet drama about dairy and wheat and what to eat for weight loss and what not to, you are not alone. This is one of the top reasons that clients reach out for help and why I actually love the group setting in our 12-week group weight loss program. There's a really clear roadmap of what to focus on, and there is plenty of accountability and space to ask questions. So if someone goes, hey, you shouldn't eat this, you can come to the group and get the real answers on whether you should focus on it or not. You get live Zooms every week to make sure you get those questions and individual coaching so you can talk through it. A lot like this, you can post in that face group any day of the week, and you get individual feedback. So if there's something more personal like gut issues along with your weight loss, you and I can fine tune what we're doing in the group to be more personalized. I would love to help you get focused so you can see more consistent results and feel confident and good in your skin again, all without cutting out all of your favorite foods or only ordering salad for the rest of your life. Now, if you start this month, that means you'll be supported right through the holidays, one of the trickiest times, instead of having to take on another diet or set another year's worth of weight or healthy eating resolutions by January 1st. So I'm going to encourage you, if you're feeling stuck or overwhelmed or just ready to feel better in your skin, more confident how you eat, reply here. I'd love to chat. I'm ready to help. Now, I'd love to know what other foods you've heard about having interactions with weight loss or gut health so we can debunk them and get really clear on all the ins and outs here. So reply back and let me know. Do you want to hear about wheat, eggs, something else? I'd love to help.